Good evening and welcome to 365 Days of Amazing Stories with Theo Mayer. Here we are on day 26, and I'm continuing stories from the book I'm writing, Fire on the Mountain, Living with Wildfire in Big Sur. So I think I left the story off where Cal Fire and state parks had not done a really good job of estimating what the fire was going to do. Their call of, "We've got this handled," didn't seem to be the case. Now, we went back, Andreas, Norm, and I, back to the fire station. And that morning, actually, I had had a meeting with Pete from Peninsula Septic System. I can't remember. They are the septic trucks, septic tank trucks that drive around that say on them may be hauling political promises, which I think is kind of funny because, they're full of shit. Anyway, so I'd had that meeting, and when the call went off on my pager, I was actually right down by the fire station. So it was really easy to get on that call with Andreas and Norm. When we got back, we took our gear off. I laid down on the stone, the concrete outside the bays of the firehouse, the garage doors. I lay down there just because I was hot. I had a fever, and I'd woken up with a fever that morning, so I was trying to just kind of cool down on the concrete. It was in July, one of the hottest months in Big Sur. Eventually, I drove home, and all I wanted to do was lay down. I could hear planes, spotter planes, helicopters that were attempting to put the fire out. But of course, the fire just started growing and moving very quickly across the landscape. Now, it turned out that my friend Mark Wheeland was down. It was a Friday when the fire started. He'd come down for the weekend. A friend of his, Bruce, was staying there, always comes. I think he's a architect professor in New Orleans somewhere. Anyway, it was his annual visit. The two of them ended up spending all of the afternoon and evening and Friday and Saturday morning packing stuff up and hauling it down to the basement that was underneath Mark's house. Now, the chances of Mark's house burning would have been slim because it was a rammed earth house with tile roof. But they were still concerned, and the fire was getting very, very close. By Saturday morning, that fire was across the canyon from them, across Garrapatta Creek on the other side, and coming down the mountain. Mark eventually left, and he called me as he was leaving, just worried that he might lose everything. He had a lot to lose, and I'd been helping Mark out at his place for a long time. Mark and I been friends since we were in our early 20s, back in our college days at Stanford. He and I were we loved the out of doors and loved diving, loved exploring cool places in nature. And it had taken me 25 years to graduate from Stanford, and when I went back in 1999, I stayed at Mark's house until whatever it was, June of 2021, when I finally graduated. So Mark and I are very, very close, like brothers. He called me, let me know he was leaving, wished me luck, and off he went on Saturday. I was so sick, I just couldn't do anything. All I wanted to do was lay still. And, I was drinking water, but not much. I was pretty ill. about 3, 4 in the afternoon, I looked out toward the north, across Rocky Creek. And there on the other side of the canyon, there were flames now at the top of the ridge there. It was clear that the fire was coming, and I better do something to get ready. So I rallied. I think I ate some chocolate-covered espresso beans, had some water, and I started by getting all the leaves off my roofs and all the leaves out of the gutters. Because if a hot ember got on the roof and started leaves burning, that would have been a bad thing. All my roofs were metal. I had copper, and one place I had galvanized metal gutters. So I didn't have a blower. I had to sweep all these leaves off. And it took quite a while. And a friend came by. Now, I had thought everyone had left. I had watched as I was cleaning my roof, one person after another drive down the hill. In fact, one person I thought would never leave was a neighbor named Zach. And when I saw him go down the mountain, I was just like, oh man, what am I doing staying up here? I started really questioning myself. And the only reason why I did stay was because I had a cold room that doubled as a fire shelter, completely buried except one wall that had the door in it. I had scuba tanks in there, fresh water, food. And the other thing I did, actually, before I started sweeping off the roofs, I took my valuables out there to the cold room and put them in the cold room, just so if my house did burn, at least some things would be saved. And I took a lot of my clothing and I put it in the kitchen that was right next to the cold room, which was half buried in the earth and made out of concrete with a metal roof. I figured that wouldn't burn either. Anyway, thinking I was alone on the mountain, I wasn't. My neighbor Christian had come over just to check in with me. And he jumped up on the roof, at least one roof, and helped me get it clean. And it was quite a relief to know that somebody else was up there. My one neighbor, Pat, who lives right above me, Pat Palestrini, he'd come down, begged me to leave. He was really worried about me staying. But when he was leaving, he offered me anything that I needed from his place. He said, get food, get water from our tanks if you need to. Just whatever you need, Theo, take it. Which was very, very generous. And with a big hug, he departed. Anyway, Christian helped me a little bit and then said he was going to go check on the fire and let me know that if when he drove back by, if he honked, I better be ready for the fire. Well, he did drive back by, but he didn't honk. So I thought, okay, things might not be so bad. Now, as this is all going on, I'm able to watch the fire and its activity from the roofs of my buildings. And it was intense. Looking down into Rocky Creek and that whole watershed, the fire was moving fast and it just seemed very chaotic. It seemed like it was everywhere all at once. At a certain point in time, sort of to the northwest of me, there were just huge flames reaching high into the sky. And I assumed that a neighbor's house had burned, Bart Wayland, and was correct. Probably 45 minutes later, another big blaze took up and I could see this house burning. It was kind of down the ridge from me. Well, it was down and then back up the ridge from me. And it was the Tucker's place. I felt horrible that there was really nothing I could do to help save their places. And I was just so sick. There was no way I could get over there to do it. Well, if I had been well, I could have. But if I'd been well, I probably would have gotten talked off the mountain by the fire brigade. because I was on the fire brigade and I would probably have been expected to be on duty and not at my own place. So having a fever was actually a benefit, probably, that I had it. And while the fire was coming and I still had a telephone line, people were calling from the fire brigade and begging me to get down the hill, letting me know that it was time to get off the mountain. Anyway, I didn't. I stayed. And at a certain point, I went inside, kind of freshened up a little bit. I can't remember. I may have even taken a bath, ate a little more food, drank some water. And I then headed down the hill in an old 4Runner I had with a shovel and some water bottles. And I stopped the 4Runner in the driveway close to the main road, main Long Ridge Road. And just up the hill on a saddle, well, call it a saddle because it's a low spot on the ridge, kind of like sitting in a saddle, you know, how it's scooped out. Just up from where the low spot is in the saddle and my lower driveway, there was the fire. Now it was about, the fire line was probably about 100 yards in length. And in some places it was just creeping, and in other places the flames were exceedingly high. Burning brush, plenty of fuel, 10, 12, maybe 15 feet high. Well, I knew I couldn't tackle that, especially with a shovel. So I went up to the place where the flames were very small, maybe 8, 10 inches, maybe a foot high. And I started shoveling dirt onto the flames. The flames were just very slowly creeping across the landscape. Now remember, I was sick, and fires are smoky. It was hard because I just didn't have much energy, and I kept feeling even worse when the smoke would get in my face and I'd be breathing smoke. There were a number of times where I just lay down on the cool ground within like a few feet of the fire, just to catch my breath, to rest a little bit. And then I'd get up and I kept shoveling earth onto this small line of fire. And little by little, I made my way across the landscape. From main Long Ridge Road, I started heading basically in a southwest direction toward a lower road that allowed access to Jerry and Helen Forbes's house. So here I am, shoveling, and it's totally pitch black. I don't know what the moon was doing. I don't think there was a moon, but it was dark, except the headlamp that I had on my head. Shoveled, places where the fire had been huge. Once it kind of burned itself out a little bit and was small, I would go over there and then put that part of the fire out. And I worked this thing all through the night. And I'll leave the story right here for now. Okay, thanks for joining. Have a good rest.